All right, folks, buckle up because today we're about to step into the twilight zone of reality. Or is it the underground journey? You see, there are stories that seem strange. Then there are stories that make you question everything about the timeline we're living in. And let me tell you, when it comes to Ingersoll Lockwood's 19th century books, Baron Trump's marvelous underground journey, and The Last President, you might find yourself wondering if the past somehow predicted the present. You've probably heard the name Trump before. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know we're talking about none other than Donald Trump and his son Baron Trump. Now, what if I told you there's a set of books from the late 1800s that features a young boy named Baron Trump and a political outsider named, well, the last president? Yup, that's what we're getting into today. Is this pure coincidence, or is something more at play here? Are these books merely forgotten works of fiction, or is there a prophetic layer to them? Maybe even a conspiracy? I don't know about you, but the hair on my neck stands up just thinking about it. This episode, we're going to dig deep into the parallels between Lockwood's novels and modern-day events. We'll break down the books, go over the wild conspiracy theories floating around, and dive into what all this means for us. Is this just another case of weird synchronicity, or is there a deeper, hidden truth waiting to be uncovered? You know how we roll here at Broadcasting Seeds. We plant the seeds of truth, even if it's stranger than fiction. So grab your tinfoil hats or your thinking caps, because by the end of today's episode, you'll either be questioning reality or saying, wow, that's a wild coincidence. Either way, it's going to be a ride. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy the show, take a second to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with your friends. It helps us grow and keeps these strange stories coming your way. All right, let's jump in. So before we jump into the freaky stuff, let's take a moment to talk about Ingersoll Lockwood, the man behind the books that have the internet in a chokehold with conspiracy theories. Who was he? Was he some kind of time-traveling Nostradamus? A secret government agent with knowledge of future events? Or just a guy with a wild imagination? Born in 1841, Lockwood was an American lawyer and writer. A regular Joe from upstate New York, he had a pretty respectable career, working as a lawyer for the U.S. government. But, like all great minds that dabble in the strange, Lockwood also had an interest in storytelling, particularly in the realm of children's fantasy and political satire. That's right. The dude was writing whimsical stories way before J.K. Rowling was conjuring up wizards. Lockwood published a couple of books in the late 1800s that have recently gotten a lot of attention. Baron Trump's marvelous underground journey in 1893 and The Last President in 1896. For years, these books were just dusty old relics, probably forgotten in the back corner of some library. But fast forward to the 21st century, and suddenly they've found a new life because of the bizarre parallels to our world today. But here's the kicker. These novels are packed with some downright eerie coincidences. So eerie, in fact, that you have to wonder, was Lockwood just an imaginative guy, or was he plugged into something bigger, something otherworldly? Now, we could chalk this up to the idea that history repeats itself, right? Maybe Lockwood just happened to write about themes and characters that happened to align with today's events. Or was he dropping breadcrumbs about the future? Listeners know we like to ask the tough questions, and we aren't afraid to step into the bizarre. In Baron Trump's marvelous underground journey, Lockwood introduces a young aristocrat named Baron Trump. Yeah, you heard that right.
Imagine this, a book written in 1893 about a boy named Baron Trump. An aristocrat with ties to Russia, navigating strange lands and impossible odds. Now, imagine that boy shares more than just a name with a modern figure, the towering, enigmatic son of Donald Trump. Is this a bizarre coincidence, or a prophecy unfolding before our eyes? Chapter 1. Rediscovering a Forgotten Story. In 1893, a little-known lawyer and writer named Ingersoll Lockwood penned The Adventures of Baron Trump. This whimsical children's novel was part satire, part fantasy, a tale of a precocious boy born into privilege, traveling to fantastical realms in search of truth. For decades, the book was forgotten, tucked away in dusty libraries. Fast forward to the 21st century. This obscure children's book is rediscovered, and readers are stunned. The boy's name? Baron Trump. The connection? Donald Trump's youngest son, Baron. But the similarities don't stop there. As the internet digs deeper, a question emerges. Could this be a prophecy hiding in plain sight? To understand this enigma, we must journey back to Lockwood's world and uncover how his words resonate eerily in today's reality. Chapter 2. The Strange Life of Baron Trump. Baron Trump is no ordinary boy. Lockwood describes him as headstrong, self-absorbed, and determined to explore. He's a noble child of immense intelligence, often misunderstood by those around him. Baron spends his days immersed in the wisdom of Don Fum's World Within a World, a guidebook to hidden dimensions. Does this remind you of someone? Baron Trump, the tall and enigmatic son of Donald and Melania Trump, also seems to exist in a world apart. Raised in luxury, protected from the media's glare, Baron remains an enigma. At 6'7", he looms over his peers, much like the larger-than-life character of Lockwood's book. The uncanny resemblance raises eyebrows. Could the fictional Baron be a literary reflection of the modern Baron? Both boys are described as intelligent, aloof, and remarkably composed for their age. Could Lockwood's character have been a figment of his imagination, or a premonition of the modern-day Trump heir? Chapter 3. The Adventures of Baron Trump. In the book, young Baron is guided by a mysterious manuscript, Don Fum's World Within a World. This cryptic guide promises to lead him to hidden realms beneath the surface of the earth. Armed with his intellect and the companionship of his loyal dog Bulger, Baron embarks on a series of adventures that test his wit, courage, and morality. He encounters strange creatures, including giants, talking animals, and beings with mystical powers. Along the way, he learns valuable lessons about leadership, humility, and the nature of truth. Now consider Baron Trump. Though he doesn't have a dog named Bulger or a map to hidden worlds, he's navigating an equally treacherous landscape. the media spotlight, public scrutiny, and the legacy of a father who divides opinion like no other. His adventures may not involve underground kingdoms, but they require resilience, strategy, and a sense of identity. Qualities that his fictional counterpart had to develop on his journeys. Chapter 4. The Prophecy of the Last President. Here's where things get truly strange. Ingersoll Lockwood didn't stop with the adventures of Baron Trump. 2 years later, he published another book titled 1900, or The Last President. In this story, a political outsider becomes president and plunges New York City into chaos. The details are startling. The president lives on Fifth Avenue, the same location as Trump Tower. There are riots and unrest following his election, eerily reminiscent of events in 2016 and 2020. Even more bizarrely, Baron Trump's fictional adventures take him to Russia, foreshadowing Donald Trump's contentious ties to the country over a century later. These parallels have fueled countless conspiracy theories. Was Lockwood a time traveler, a clairvoyant, or was it all a strange coincidence? One that grows harder to dismiss the deeper you dive.
Chapter 5. The Mystery of Baron Trump. Let's shift focus to the real Baron Trump. At 18 years old, he's already a figure of intrigue. He's largely stayed out of the public eye, shielded by his mother, Melania, who fiercely protects his privacy. Yet his towering height, quiet demeanor, and striking resemblance to his father make him impossible to ignore. Melania Trump famously described him as Little Donald, saying he shares his father's love of business and leadership. Yet Baron also has his mother's reserved nature, staying largely out of the media's reach. In the fictional Baron Trump, we see a boy who doesn't quite fit in, a young aristocrat with bigger dreams than his surroundings can contain. Could Baron Trump too be destined for a unique path? Perhaps he's not just a footnote in his father's legacy, but a figure who will one day step into his own spotlight. Chapter 6. Conspiracy or coincidence? The internet is divided. On one hand, skeptics dismiss the connections as coincidences. After all, the name Trump wasn't uncommon in the 19th century. On the other hand, conspiracy theorists have woven intricate tales of time travel, secret codes, and prophetic visions. The connections between the adventures of Baron Trump and today's Trump family are too striking to ignore. The aristocratic boy with a noble name and an extraordinary destiny. The travel to Russia, echoing real-world controversies. The parallels between Lockwood's last president and Donald Trump's presidency. Some claim the books are evidence of time travel, pointing to their uncanny predictions. Others see them as clever coincidences that tap into universal archetypes of power, leadership, and destiny. What's undeniable is this. These stories have captured the public's imagination, weaving a narrative that blurs the line between fiction and reality. A mystery for the ages. So what are we to make of the adventures of Baron Trump? Is it a whimsical tale from a bygone era or a prophetic vision of the future? And what of Baron Trump himself? Perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in the books, but in the boy. As Baron Trump grows into adulthood, he'll face the daunting task of defining his own path. Whether it follows the footsteps of his father or blazes a trail all his own. As we watch his journey unfold, one thing is certain. Like Lockwood's fictional Baron, Baron Trump's story will be anything but ordinary. Could it be, you might ask, that the real adventure is only just beginning?
Baron Trump, a boy who embarks on fantastical adventures through time and space, led by a mentor figure named Don. Don? That sound familiar? In the other book, The Last President, Lockwood writes about a political outsider who wins an unexpected victory in the presidential election. This outsider, mind you, is not exactly welcomed by the political establishment. Sound familiar again? So, the million-dollar question. What was Lockwood really up to when he wrote these books? Was he just tapping into the cultural zeitgeist of his time? Or was there something more? We're going to take a hard look at the facts and fiction and see if we can separate the truth from the strange.
So, in this video, I'm going to do 2 more readings from the book 1900 or The Last President. Okay? I want to point out a few things. First off, Lockwood, the gentleman that wrote this book, he looks identical to the current sitting CIA head of the CIA today. The one that Biden put in office. Look at that picture. Look at it. Okay, having said that, yes, Donald Trump's uncle knew and got some of Tesla's stuff. Not saying anything about time traveling, anything that I'm just saying yes. Second, in the book 1900, The Last President, are you ready for this? Baron Trump's dad, the president, actually hires a gentleman to sit on his cabinet by the last name of Pence. I'm not making it up. You'll see it in the clips. You guys ready for a little more Baron Trump collection? Now remember, this is a trilogy. That means 3 books in one, folks, and I am reading from The Last President, or 1900. I'm going to start with the opening chapter. That was a terrible night for this great city of New York. The night of Tuesday, November 3rd, 1896. The city staggered under the blow like a huge ocean liner which plunges full speed with terrific crash into a mighty iceberg and recoils shattered and trembling like an aspen. The people were gathered, lighthearted and confident, at the evening meal when the news burst upon them. It was like a thunderbolt out of an azure sky. Adelgeld holds Illinois hard and fast in the Democratic line. This elects Bryan President of the United States. Strange to say, the people in the upper portion of the city made no movement to rush out of their houses and collect in the public squares, although the night was clear and beautiful. They sat as if paralyzed with a nameless dread, and when they conversed, it was with bated breath and throbbing heart. In less than half an hour, mounted policemen dashed through the streets calling out, "Keep within your houses, close your doors and barricade them. The entire East Side is in a state of uproar. Mobs of vast size are organizing under the lead of anarchists and socialists and threaten to plunder and despoil the houses of the rich who have wronged and opposed them for so many years. Keep within doors and extinguish all lights." Here's a bit from chapter 2, folks. Great as has been the world's wonder at the uprising of Mr. Bryan's struggling masses in the city by the sea and the narrow escape of his magnificent homes from fire and brand, yet greater still was the wonderment when the news was flashed across the land that Chicago did not stand in need of a single federal soldier. Chicago is mad, but it is a madness of joy. Chicago is in the hands of a mob, but it is a mob made up of her own people, noisy, rude, and boisterous. the natural exaltation of a suddenly enfranchised class, but bent on no other mischief than glorying over and self-seeking souls who have ground the faces of the poor and turned the pitiless screw of social and political power into the hearts of the common people, until its last thread had been reached and despair pressed its lupine visage hard against the door of the laboring man. Now I'm going to stop here. For ones of you who may not have seen my earlier video, this book, the Baron Trump Collection, was written in the 1890s. This book has an ISBN number. There are no new translations, which would then provide a new ISBN number. Has the original. So nobody corrected things and did a reprint. This is the book written 130 years ago. Lockwood is amazing. Now, I'm going to be doing a major breakdown of this on my YouTube channel, Starkey Farmstead, and you can follow it there. But this is for the ones of you who were so excited and went ahead and bought your books, but you wanted a little bit more reading. That's what I'm doing tonight, folks. And so Chicago celebrated the election of the new president, who was to free the land from the grasp of the moneylenders and undo the bad business of years of unholy union between borrowers and sellers of human toil and the lawmakers of the land. Now, I heard a comment earlier today that says people in the 1800s, 1900s didn't speak like this. I literally started to laugh. Of course they did laugh. They were highly educated. Highly educated. They would make most of us modern day people look, well, rather not so smart. Are you ready for one more reading? Just one more before we go to bed. Let me introduce you to Lockwood's book, The Baron Trump Collection. This is a trilogy, means 3 books in one, folks. The book you're looking for is called 1900, The Last President. Yes, there is only one R in the spelling of this book because it's called a fictional story. Now, I'm going to read what I really consider to be my most favorite part of this book to you guys. Then I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to let you wait until you get yours in. Are you guys ready? There had been a strange prophecy put forth by someone and had made its way into the daily journals and had been laughingly or seriously commented upon, according to the political tone of the paper or the passing humor of the writer, that the 4th of March, 1897, would never dawn upon the American people. There was something very curious and uncanny about the prediction, and what actually happened was not qualified to loosen the fearful tension of public anxiety. For the day literally and truly never dawned upon the city of Washington, and well deserves its historical name, the Dawnless Day. At 6 o'clock, the hour of daybreak, such an impenetrable pall of clouds overhung the city that there came no signs of day. The gathering crowds could plainly hear the plaintive cries and lamentations put up in the Negro quarters of the city, but not until nearly 9 o'clock did the light cease to shine in darkness, and the darkness begin to comprehend it. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it comes from the Bible. But although it was a cheerless gray day, even at high noon, its heaviness set no weight upon the spirits of the jubilant tens of thousands, which completely filled the city and its public parks and ran over into camps and hastily impoverished shelters outside the city limits. Not until the day previous had the president announced the names of those selected for his cabinet. The South and Far West were fairly beside themselves with joy, for there had been from their standpoint ugly rumors abroad for several days. Sound familiar? It had been hinted that Bryan had surrendered to the money changers, and that the selection of his constitutional advisors would prove him recreant to the glorious cause of popular government, and that the reign of the common people would remain but a dream of the struggling masses. You guys, in this book, the person he chose for his Secretary of Agriculture, his name is Pence. Do you see that? Pence, right there. Okay? Remember, this was written 130 years ago. It is a fictional story, But I will say, curious enough, Lockwood was actually around the time that Donald Trump, the president, his parents and or grandparents would have been in New York. Plus, Lockwood had ties to Germany.
All right, now that we've got a sense of who Ingersoll Lockwood was, let's dive into one of his most talked about works, Baron Trump's marvelous underground journey. And let me tell you, it's every bit as bizarre as it sounds. The book centers around a young aristocrat named, you guessed it, Baron Trump. He's a bit of a privileged kid living in Castle Trump, a place that's, let's say, more than a little fancy. Baron, however, isn't satisfied with his luxurious lifestyle. No, this kid's got the itch for adventure, and he decides to embark on a journey that takes him deep underground to a world filled with strange creatures and alternate realities. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Baron is guided by his mentor, a wise and mysterious character named Don. I know you're all thinking it. This can't be a coincidence, right? I mean, Don guiding a young Baron Trump through unknown lands? It's as if Lockwood pulled these names right out of a future history book. But back in the 1890s, nobody would have batted an eye at this. It was just another children's adventure story full of whimsy and weirdness. So, what's the deal with this underground journey? It's not just a trip to see funky creatures and bizarre landscapes. Baron Trump's journey is often seen as an allegory for exploring uncharted territories of the mind and spirit. He ventures into the unknown, guided by an older, wiser mentor, kind of like the classic hero's journey you see in so many myths and legends. But here's the thing. Lockwood's descriptions of Baron Trump's journey are filled with strange, almost prophetic elements. For example, Baron travels to the center of the Earth, where he encounters advanced civilizations and beings who live outside the realm of normal time. Is this just pure fantasy? Or could it be a metaphor for something deeper? Something like, I don't know, hidden truths or suppressed knowledge. Think about it for a second. Underground, unknown realms, hidden societies. I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like the kind of conspiracy fodder we see today. Could Lockwood have been alluding to underground bases, secret governments, or even inner Earth civilizations like Agartha? Sure, it sounds wild, but we've seen crazier theories out there, and some of them have turned out to hold water. Another weird twist? Some readers have pointed out that Baron's underground journey could be seen as a metaphor for exploring deep, hidden state secrets or even cryptic governmental projects. You know, those things they don't want us to know about. And with a guide named Don leading him, well, I'll leave that up to you to interpret. Maybe Baron is a stand-in for younger generations, searching for answers in a world guided by older mysterious powers. But we can't ignore the obvious parallel. This story of Baron Trump is a tale of a boy led on a grand, otherworldly adventure, much like today's Baron Trump being thrust into the public eye as the son of one of the most polarizing figures in modern history. And then there's the time aspect. In the book, Baron doesn't age normally during his travels, raising questions about time manipulation. Time travel? Alternate dimensions? Maybe. But what we do know is that this underground journey isn't just your typical kid's book. Lockwood weaves in layers of meaning that make us question how far-fetched these ideas really are. Was this just Lockwood's wild imagination? Or did he tap into some kind of premonition about future events? After all, the Trump name didn't mean anything back in 1893, but today, it's one of the most recognized and controversial names in the world. So, is this just a case of life imitating art? Or did Ingersoll Lockwood somehow foresee the rise of the Trump family? Was Baron Trump's marvelous underground journey a veiled allegory for future political and social movements? Or are we reading too much into a dusty old children's book? Maybe. But then again, where we explore the strange and the unexplained. And if you think this is just the beginning of the weirdness, wait until we get into The Last President. So we've already dipped our toes into Baron Trump's marvelous underground journey. But if you thought that was eerie, buckle up. Let's talk about Ingersoll Lockwood's other famous work, The Last President. This book was published in 1896. Yes, that's over 120 years ago, and it's essentially a political thriller. But here's the kicker. The storyline mirrors some pretty striking events in modern politics. You almost have to ask yourself, was this guy some kind of clairvoyant? Or was it pure coincidence? Either way, the parallels between The Last President and today's political climate are enough to make you sit up a little straighter in your chair. The novel starts with absolute chaos in the streets of New York City. Sound familiar? The country is on the brink of collapse after a highly contested election. The candidate who wins the presidency is an outsider, someone completely unexpected and, let's say, not exactly loved by the political establishment. As soon as he's declared the winner, all hell breaks loose. Protests, riots, looting, the whole 9 yards. Sound familiar yet? I'm sure 2020 is flashing through your minds right now. The people are furious, particularly in the cities. Protesters storm Fifth Avenue, and guess what? They march straight to, wait for it, the Trump Hotel. In Lockwood's time, it wasn't called the Trump Hotel, of course, but today we know that building as the iconic Trump Tower. And that's just one of the many coincidences that make this book feel like a plot ripped straight from today's headlines. So let's talk about this president in Lockwood's novel. He's not a career politician.
So Elon is the...
Now, what's wild is that Lockwood's character represents the rise of populism, something we've seen play out in real time with Donald Trump's presidency. He's elected on a wave of dissatisfaction, promising to drain the swamp and shake up the status quo. But his victory doesn't lead to national unity. Oh no, quite the opposite. The division grows wider, tensions escalate, and the nation teeters on the brink of anarchy. Now, if that doesn't feel like déjà vu, I don't know what does. But wait, there's more. One of the novel's most unsettling predictions is the public's fear of what this president could do once in power. Many believe he'll dismantle everything, and the establishment is in full-blown panic mode. He's seen as a danger to the republic, and those in power are determined to stop him by any means necessary. It's almost as if Lockwood had front-row seats to today's political drama, watching from a distance. And let's talk about the financial collapse depicted in the book. The markets crash, and the economy spirals out of control. We're talking about the kind of economic instability that could lead to a full-scale collapse of the system. It's not hard to draw parallels here, given the economic uncertainty we've faced in recent years, from trade wars to global pandemics. Again, Lockwood's portrayal of a crumbling financial system hits a little too close to home. But here's the part that really gives me chills. The novel suggests that the election of this president could be a catalyst for the end of America as we know it. In Lockwood's fictional world, it's the beginning of the end. A last president, if you will, heralding the fall of the republic. Now, let's be clear here. We're not saying that Donald Trump is literally the last president of the United States, but you can see why conspiracy theorists have latched onto this book like it's some kind of crystal ball. They see it as a prophetic warning, and whether or not you buy into that, you've got to admit, it's a bit eerie, isn't it? Let's take a step back for a second and think about what Lockwood was really trying to say. Was he just a guy ahead of his time, predicting the political and social fractures that would eventually appear in America? Or was this book an elaborate piece of satire aimed at mocking the political system of his own era? After all, the late 19th century wasn't exactly a time of political calm. Corruption, scandals, and the rise of populist movements were just as relevant back then as they are now. But here's the thing. When you start to pile up the similarities between the last president and our world today, it becomes harder and harder to dismiss this as simple coincidence. I mean, we've got protests, political outsiders, civil unrest, economic instability. It's like Lockwood took today's headlines and dressed them up in 19th century clothes. So, what do we do with this? Was Lockwood trying to warn us about the dangers of populism and political division, or was he simply writing a fantastical story that just happened to predict some of the craziest moments in modern American history? You decide. But one thing's for sure. Lockwood's The Last President reads less like a novel and more like a script for our daily news coverage. Next up, we're diving headfirst into the world of conspiracy theories. Yeah, we're going there. Time travel, hidden government secrets, and the ever-present question, did Lockwood somehow tap into the future when he wrote these books, or is this all just a wild coincidence that's been blown way out of proportion? Stay tuned. All right, folks. Now we're getting into the juicy stuff, where reality meets conspiracy and where strange coincidences can take on a life of their own. We've laid out the uncanny similarities between Lockwood's books and modern events, but now it's time to look at how people have taken these similarities and spun them into full-blown theories. Some might say it's a stretch, others, well, let's just say they believe Lockwood knew a lot more than he let on. One of the most popular and wild conspiracy theories is that Lockwood was a time traveler, or at the very least, had access to some kind of time-bending technology. I know, it sounds crazy, but let's break it down. Time travel has been a recurring theme in fiction, science, and even government projects, if we're to believe certain rumors. I'm looking at you, Montauk Project enthusiasts. The idea here is that Lockwood somehow traveled to the future or accessed future knowledge, which is how he was able to write books that so closely resemble events that wouldn't happen until more than a century later. Now let's be real for a second. Time travel theories are a dime a dozen, and they almost always fall apart under scrutiny. But in this case, the specific details, the names, the political scenarios, the timing, are what keep people coming back for more. And hey, stranger things have happened, right? In a world where quantum mechanics is starting to prove that time might not be as linear as we thought, who's to say that the idea of time travel is completely off the table? Another angle is that Lockwood didn't need to time travel because he was part of an elite group, an Illuminati-type organization with deep ties to secret government projects. This group, the theory goes, was already experimenting with futuristic technology, hidden underground civilizations, and perhaps even manipulating world events from behind the scenes. If this sounds like something out of a Dan Brown novel, well, welcome to the rabbit hole. But think about it. If a secretive group had access to advanced knowledge, whether through technology, ancient wisdom, or something else, Lockwood might have been using his novels as a way to subtly leak information. You know, hiding in plain sight. After all, fiction is often used to cover truths that can't be directly spoken about. Some say it's easier to accept truth when it's wrapped in a layer of fantasy. Was Lockwood trying to warn us? Or was he simply laying out a roadmap for the elite to follow? And then there's the theory about the Trump family itself. Some believe that the Trump family, particularly Donald and Barron, are directly tied to these mysteries. The idea is that Donald Trump, through his family's vast wealth and influence, somehow uncovered Lockwood's books, maybe even as part of some government operation, and used them as a blueprint for his rise to power. Far-fetched? Sure. But in a world where billionaires have more resources than many governments, it's not beyond the realm of possibility. Take this a step further, and some people claim that the Trump family might be directly involved in time travel experiments. I know it sounds like a plot ripped straight from Back to the Future, but conspiracy theorists point to everything from Trump's unusual rise to power to the eerie appearance of his son Barron, who, let's face it, looks like he walked straight out of a Victorian painting. I'm not saying Barron Trump is a time traveler, but, well, some people out there definitely are, and it doesn't stop there. Some believe that the last president and Barron Trump's marvelous underground journey were actually coded messages to future generations, blueprints for understanding the real power dynamics at play. The underground journey in the book? A metaphor for underground bases or hidden societies like those rumored to exist under places like Dulce, New Mexico, or even under the Antarctic ice. And that's just scratching the surface. There are theories that connect this all to Nikola Tesla, who, as some of you might know, was reported to be working on time-related experiments. Tesla and Trump are linked by a very curious connection. After Tesla's death, the FBI seized many of his papers, and those documents were reportedly reviewed by none other than John G. Trump, Donald Trump's uncle. According to the conspiracy, John Trump had access to Tesla's secrets and passed that knowledge down through the family, leading to where we are today. Yeah, I told you, this rabbit hole goes deep. But whether you buy into this theory or not, you can't deny that the Trump-Tesla connection is a curious one. Did Tesla's knowledge influence the events we see playing out now? Or is it all just a string of coincidences? And let's not forget the deeper layers of government secrecy that tie into all of this. Hidden programs, black budget projects, and yes, even time-bending experiments have long been rumored to exist within the halls of power. Some say that Lockwood was privy to this knowledge and that his books were simply a way of passing along forbidden information to those who could decode it. Is any of this real? That's for you to decide. But what we do know is that people have been obsessed with these theories for years, and the more you dig, the more connections you start to see, whether they're real or not. So, was Ingersoll Lockwood simply a man ahead of his time, or was he a cog in a much larger, far-reaching conspiracy? Was he privy to secrets that have yet to be fully uncovered? Time travel, hidden government agendas, and secret societies. It sounds far-fetched, but when you look at the patterns, you start to wonder how much of it could be true. Up next, we'll take a step back and ask the question that's been hanging over this entire episode. What does it all mean for us today? Are these just fun, speculative stories, or is there a deeper significance that we need to pay attention to as we navigate an increasingly uncertain world? We've gone down the rabbit hole of Lockwood's strange books, the eerie parallels to modern events, and the wild conspiracy theories surrounding time travel and hidden agendas. But now, let's zoom out a little and look at the bigger picture. What does all of this mean for us today? What impact do these ideas, whether true, partially true, or completely fictional, have on our lives, our society, and our future? First, let's talk about the human tendency to find patterns in things. There's a term for this: apophenia, the experience of seeing patterns or connections in random or unrelated data. It's part of how our brains are wired. When we come across stories like Lockwood's, filled with eerie parallels to our current world, it's natural to want to connect the dots. But just because we can connect the dots doesn't always mean we should. Sometimes patterns exist because our minds create them, not because they're really there. Or at least, that's what some would say. On the flip side, history has shown us time and time again that truth is often stranger than fiction. Secret government projects, political cover-ups, and mysterious figures pulling the strings from behind the scenes. That's not just conspiracy talk. We've seen it happen in real life, and it's often those who are willing to ask the tough questions that uncover the truth. So, while some of these theories may seem outlandish, they serve as a reminder that we should always be asking questions, always be curious, and always be digging deeper. Let's take a look at how these kinds of stories impact society. Whether or not Lockwood's books were prophetic or simply coincidental, the fascination they've sparked has real-world consequences. People are more skeptical than ever of the narratives they're fed by the media, government, and even history itself. The rise of the internet has amplified this skepticism, giving a platform to voices and ideas that, in earlier times, would have been dismissed or marginalized. And while that can be a good thing, creating a more informed and questioning public, it also opens the door for disinformation and paranoia to spread. Look at the way the story of the last president has fed into modern political divisions. Some see it as proof that Donald Trump's presidency was destined, part of a larger cosmic or divine plan. Others see it as a cautionary tale, warning us about the dangers of populism and the erosion of democratic norms. The truth? Well, it's probably somewhere in the middle. But the fact that these books have become a point of debate in today's political landscape tells us that the lines between fiction, conspiracy, and reality are blurring more than ever. And then there's the effect on individuals. People are increasingly questioning the very fabric of reality, whether that's through the lens of time travel, hidden governments, or secret societies. These stories encourage people to dig deeper, to question what they're told, and to consider possibilities beyond the mainstream narrative. That's powerful. Whether or not you believe in the specifics of the theories, they encourage a level of critical thinking that's often missing from day-to-day life. But there's also a danger in this. When people start to believe that nothing is as it seems, that there's always a hidden hand pulling the strings, it can lead to a kind of nihilism or paranoia. If you start believing that everything is a conspiracy, that reality itself is up for grabs, it becomes difficult to trust anything. That can create a society where facts don't matter, where everything is seen as subjective, and where chaos reigns. That's the dark side of these kinds of stories. So, where do we go from here? What do we do with the knowledge or the suspicions that these books and theories raise? For starters, we need to keep asking questions. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Curiosity is one of our greatest strengths as humans. It's what pushes us to uncover truths, to innovate, and to evolve. But there's a balance to be struck between healthy skepticism and outright paranoia. We can't let our desire for answers lead us down paths where we lose our grip on reality. At the same time, we need to be aware of the power of stories. Stories shape the way we see the world, whether they come from books, movies, news media, or podcasts like this one. Lockwood's books, whether they were intended as prophecies or not, have influenced the way people think about politics, the future, and the very nature of reality. And they're a reminder that sometimes fiction can tell us more about the present than we realize. For all we know, these books were simply Lockwood's commentary on his own time, a time of political upheaval, populism, and a rapidly changing world. But it's the fact that they still resonate today, that they still feel relevant, that gives them their power. Whether they were written with prophetic foresight or not, they tap into something universal about human nature. Our desire to understand the future, our fear of chaos, and our belief that there's always more to the story than what we're told. So what's the takeaway here? Maybe it's this. Keep your mind open, but not so open that your brain falls out. Question what you're told, but don't lose sight of reality in the process. And most importantly, stay curious, because the truth, whatever it may be, is always worth chasing. In the end, we may never know if Lockwood was simply a man with a vivid imagination or someone who tapped into something beyond time and space. But his books remind us of one thing: the line between fiction and reality isn't always as clear as we'd like to think. All right, my friends, that's a wrap for today's episode of Broadcasting Seeds. I hope you're walking away with more questions than answers, because if there's one thing we've learned today, it's that sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and maybe fiction is just a different way of telling the truth. We've talked about time travel, conspiracies, and eerie coincidences that blur the line between fantasy and reality. Whether you believe that Ingersoll Lockwood was predicting the future, tapping into hidden knowledge, or simply having a little fun with political satire, one thing's for sure: these stories have got people thinking, and that's exactly what we aim to do here on Broadcasting Seeds. So, if today's episode left you scratching your head, or maybe even double-checking the pages of Lockwood's books, be sure to spread the word. I want you to like, share, and review the podcast. It helps us grow, keeps this strange train rolling, and most importantly, helps plant those seeds in the minds of others.